friends. Uncle Marv here with another episode of my Unhealthy podcast. It is a show about health, but it comes at you from a much different perspective. We all have things in our lives that are either unhealthy, whether they're habits or relationships with things like money, friends, family, all those sorts of things. So this show is a look at how we can change all of that, fix those bad habits, turn things around. And of course, some of it is about me, but some of it is also about the friends that I meet along the way. So today I have a friend from my tech world, and we're going to be sharing some stories about her life and some major changes. Nancy Enriquez. Nancy, how are you?
Good, good. How are you, Uncle Marv?
I am doing good. And this is going to be a nice, pleasant surprise for us. This is the first time we're doing something outside of the tech world.
Oh, it is. It is. But I've been looking forward to it for quite some time, so I'm excited.
All right. So just to give the listeners an idea, you and I met, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, right before COVID, right?
Yep.
All right. And you were out west doing some IT stuff. You own at that time had owned your own IT business. I own mine here in Florida. And we met doing some, I don't know, were we even doing diversity podcasts? Is that what we were doing?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so, yeah.
All right. And I mean, you're a diverse person, so that helps with that. But then you also have some things that you do that in the tech world is making heads turn. You are a female business owner, sold your business, and have done a couple of things along the way. And now you are what we call in this industry channel chief, or you're the vice president of a global marketing something with a company called SuperOps, right?
Correct, yeah. So I'm the head of community for SuperOps now.
Okay. Head of community. Nice. Well, you and I are going to chat because when I first met you, you looked completely different than you look now. You had red hair. You had tattoos all over the place. I even dubbed you the girl with 1,000 tattoos, which it probably wasn't 1,000, was it?
No. But I think I was getting close.
Yeah, I think you had done the arms, you were doing stuff on the back, and you were filling stuff in. Why don't we just start with that? Because I think we need to understand that lifestyle, because unless you're into the tat world, you don't understand. I've never had a tat, so just to be clear. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea what they represent. I have no idea why people get them. I imagine they hurt when they go in. So tell us the story from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I would have to say that my relationship with tattoos started off, I would say, quite young. I got, my first tattoo when I was 15. 15 in a friend's garage. Not very healthy, and not very clean either.
What? Let me ask, was that, through the eyes of beer goggles?
Oh, probably. I don't even know what or why, but I was 15. It was somebody's garage. I got my next tattoo a year later for my 16th birthday, again in somebody's garage. Actually, no, I lie. That time it was a living room.
But huge difference.
Much different. And I had, basically had always said that if I were a rock star, I would be covered in tattoos. So that was something that I had said from very early on and that kind of thing. And my parents hated it from the very beginning. And, so, I went through all this. I did a lot of things very young. So I got married at 18, had my first child at 18, started a business at 22, and had my second child at 21. So all of that very quickly happened. And during my time in starting a business and raising kids, I and being in an industry that was not very diverse back then, it led me to have a lot of feelings of imposter syndrome. It led me to feel like I didn't belong in certain ways, and I got lost very, very much so in who I am. And when I turned 30, I felt like I am finally an adult. I no longer have to hide my age, because I did try to hide my age for the longest time, and it worked because of having kids and all of that, being in the business world. And when I turned 30, I said, you know what, I'm done hiding who I am, and I want to be able to live and breathe exactly who I am authentically without any reservations. And so during that time, I let that thought carry me away, ultimately speaking. And that's when I started to get the tattoos, because I came to the realization of, well, I could be a rock star in my own industry. And so that's where I started the journey of getting the tattoos. So it's been a while.
So let me ask this question in my understanding. I'm assuming back then we're talking growing up in the 80s and 90s. Those were the days that, it wasn't quite, Leave It to Beaver, but it wasn't quite what it was in the 2000s where things became more acceptable. So was it in any way something that you did to lash out in terms of, rebel against the parents, rebel against, the popular kids in school, the corporate, suits and things like that?
Yeah, it's funny because at the time, I didn't think about it in that way, but there was definitely some of that wrapped in there, right? So being able to say, tattoos don't define who I am as a professional, or they don't define who I am as an executive, or what I can accomplish, right? So it shouldn't speak to my abilities. And that's a little bit of a rebelliousness, I guess you can say, that I've always had. And so that was definitely wrapped in there. And I understand it a lot differently now, a few years later.
Right. Now, let me go ahead and ask the weird questions about tattoos. Now, I know that you said you got started in, a garage and a living room, but when you did start to go to the professional places, those things are like needles, right? I mean, not like pens with ink. As I understand it, those things are needles. They're actually poking at you, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So it's actually a combination of a bunch of tiny needles, that make up the tattooing gun. And, through those needles, it goes through your skin and applies, the ink into different levels of your skin. And so depending on the artist and their experience and how good they are or how not, a lot of it ends up being the different shades, or if the skin becomes bumpy or raised after the tattoos. There's a lot that goes into it, once you start actually getting them.
So 2 questions. One, I've heard that you can sit for hours getting a single tattoo. Is that true?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Like, how big of a tattoo would you have to sit for, say, 3 to 4 hours?
That probably wouldn't be that big. I would say that would probably be maybe the size of your hand, if you have a small hand like me. Something like that. But it also depends on the intricacy of the tattoo itself and the level of detail that goes into it.
3 hours for the size of a orange. I mean, So now the next question is, when you're talking about needles and groups of needles and guns and ink, you mentioned that bumps can be raised on the skin afterwards. Is there a chance of infection from the needles or the ink and the dyes and stuff like that? I mean, is it really scary?
It can be, and that's why definitely don't, get a tattoo in someone's garage. Having a place that is sanitary, that they're highly professional, and a lot of the places are nowadays. As long as they are taking the right precautions, then there typically isn't a high risk, right? But it also depends on how you care for it after the fact as well. So if you get into a beach, right after getting a tattoo, it is an open wound, so that would probably lead to some infection or something along those lines. But a couple things that I didn't realize when I was getting tattoos was that it is possible for you to be allergic to the ink or to ingredients in the ink itself. And that's happened to me where I have a tattoo that I'm allergic to.
But you wouldn't find that out until afterwards. I mean, it's not like we can go to the doctor and say, hey, test me for tattoo ink, right?
Right, exactly. So I didn't find out until after I had the tattoo and it had healed, and then a couple of months later, it was bumpy and itchy, and it turned out that I was allergic to that specific color of ink.
Was it like a bad allergic reaction? Did you, what do they say? Do you have hives, or did it, cause you to sneeze and cough and breathe hard and all that stuff?
No, there was what would appear to be a tiny rash over the tattoo, and it was itchy. And that's about it. So,
okay.
And I'll apply, a cream to it, and then it's okay. Or take Benadryl and that kind of thing. So it helps in that sense. But that's something that you don't really think about, and then it's annoying after the fact because now it's stuck.
Right.
Every once in a while, I will get an allergic reaction to it. And from what a tattoo artist explained to me, a lot of the times it happens when you shed that top layer of skin. And so, when that is naturally occurring, my skin almost remembers that it's allergic to it. So it will then break out in that rash and itchy, and yeah, it's
all right.
It's fun.
So what percentage of your body do you think you had tattooed at the peak?
I would, probably about, I would say 50%. Just about.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe, I would say maybe 40%, maybe being a little more conservative. I wasn't fully covered. I hadn't gotten to my legs yet, which is what was next when I started to kind of reverse the thought process, which is, and that's essentially what's happened.
Okay. So right before we get into the reversing of the process, let's talk about how you were using this as your identity, in the sense that, I don't know if you remember this. Well, I'm sure you do. It was you. You had considered yourself a unicorn in the industry. You were known for the tattoos. It was almost like your calling card, in a sense. So in a way, these tattoos became your identity. So what was your mindset at that point when I think you were, in my mind, you're past the rebellious state. You're now at the state of ownership where this is me and this is brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. I do remember that time, and it was, almost a little bit of a high in that sense, feeling like I'm bursting out with who I am, right? That was the feeling or the emotion back then, but it changed over a certain amount of time. I had during the time that I think that we had met right along that time, I also started to go to therapy. And there was a few things happening in life during that moment, and a large part of it I had mentioned feeling the imposter syndrome, and that's ultimately what led me to start therapy. Was I don't want to have to deal with these feelings all the time. Going from feeling like an outsider or that I didn't belong, that I was talked down to frequently or around, it just because of the nature of the industry, I guess. And so that really impacted my self-esteem, and that's where the answer to that was let out some of that rebelliousness that is a part of who I am. And that's where that came from. So in a way to overcompensate for a lack of self-esteem, it was, I'm going to show it in the outside until I feel it on the inside. And so going through therapy during that time as well led to a lot of mind shifts along the way.
Can I ask what it was that drove you to therapy? Like, was there a specific event, or was it just this feeling over time of that imposter syndrome and stuff going on?
Yeah, I remember the exact moment. My ex-husband and I actually were at a conference. It's a large one in the industry. And it was one of the first ones that we had gone to. And we had, trying to remember exactly what happened, but, it wasn't a good show for me. That's where I felt at my bottom, I would say. I felt like a complete outsider within my industry, and that I didn't know what I was talking about, or being terrified to walk into a room or to sit at a table with other, IT company owners and things like that, and feeling like, what am I doing here? And that night, my partner and I had gotten into an argument, and that led me to really research what it was that I was feeling and how I was feeling. And so when we got back home right after that, I talked to a friend of mine who then referred me to a therapist, and I had just one conversation with her and realized that there was so much of the feelings that I was feeling right then and there that are being triggered by outside influences, let's say, have a lot more to do with me and how I grew up, the things that I heard as a child, the things that I went through as a child, and basically the tapes that were, continued to play in a loop in my mind, are what, ultimately speaking, led me to feeling that way. And so that's when I started therapy, to kind of deconstruct who I thought I was, and put the pieces together as to why I was feeling the way I was.
Now, I've gone to a lot of the same conferences, and as technically a solo tech in the industry, there is a lot of outside pressure from larger organizations that, well, you're not really running a business there. As a black man in the industry, there's a small percentage of me's out there that are, able to put up with the constant barrage that comes from this predominantly male-driven industry. There are more women in the industry, but they're usually treated a little differently when it comes to sales and marketing and the positions they get. Now, you as a business owner, and a minority business owner at that, I'm sure that there were things that you dealt with, but as an outsider looking in, I would not have seen that imposter syndrome. From the outside, your business was thriving. You were doing things well. You had employees at the time, so you were doing all the things right. So going to that conference, I mean, was it just the conference in general, or was it like something somebody said, a peer group conversation that kind of got thrown in your face? Because we got to stop that kind of crap.
Yeah, right? No, there wasn't anything specific.
Okay.
I think that it was definitely a compounding of things, I would say, between the imposter syndrome in the professional setting, pressures from home, being a business owner while trying to raise kids at the same time and grow a business. There was a lot that was going into it. And so part of that was feeling like I needed to do something to overcome my current challenges to get to the next level of where I wanted to go. And so I knew that I had certain limitations. And a lot of those limitations were beliefs. They were belief systems. And so that's ultimately what led to, therapy and seeking to understand what those limits were and how could I get past them.
So now the question comes up. Your identity was wrapped up in the tattoos and the hair. And as I look at you today, since the first day we met, the hair's changed. The tattoos are mostly gone. I still see a couple, but you're in this process of removing tattoos. Can I ask why? I mean, can you kind of, fix yourself in the imposter syndrome and keep those things, or is really getting rid of all of that part of what's helping you?
That's a very good question. And I think it's still an ongoing journey for me. I still go back and forth on, am I doing the right thing by removing them at this point? It really, really hurts. It's interesting because I've told a friend of mine just recently, I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, and my pain tolerance is different, or if it's a healing process throughout that has given me a different outlook on pain. And so that's a little bit of what how I see it or think about it now. So I still go a little bit back and forth on it. But I'm not a quitter, and therefore I will keep going because I started it. But, what led me to it is, I started therapy. And when I started therapy, that, recognizing that there were certain beliefs instilled in me, from childhood and from, trauma that I went through as a child, I didn't feel like a very good person, at the end of all of that. That's the core base of what I learned through therapy. And so as I worked on changing how I viewed myself and detaching from certain beliefs, and certain trauma, I learned to cope in, more healthier ways. And all of that kind of led me to realize that so many of the tattoos that I was getting were a form of coping with everything that was going on and everything that I had been through to date. So once that clicked in my mind that this was another form of mental health, in that sense, I wasn't cutting like some people do in order to cope with their mental issues, or mental struggles, but I was getting tattoos. And so that's the realization where it dawned on me that I don't want to keep hurting myself because I don't feel like I need to anymore. I've learned to cope with struggles in different ways. And so because of that, I started to see the tattoos a little differently.
but I can't imagine that they were something that you were embarrassed about. I mean, were some of them ones that maybe you just regretted that tattoo because it represented something at that time which isn't a part of you now? Or is it really just undoing all of the bad that went along with the thoughts and the imposter syndrome and the hurt and stuff?
No, there was definitely a catalyst, right? So there was a tattoo that I'm gonna just say it was a matching tattoo to my ex-husband. I say ex-husband because we are divorced now. After years, being high school sweethearts and raising children together till our oldest was 16 when we split up. It was there was a lot of change happening in my life. I sold the business. I was going through the divorce. And at the same time having to parent teenagers, which is a whole thing of its own, right? And so a lot of that was basically the sense of, let me take a step back. Because what am I, as I'm having to deal with my world falling apart ultimately, how do I cope? Because I'm going through very stressful times. And so that's essentially like my go-to thing would have been, I'm gonna go get in a tattoo chair. And I stopped myself. And that's when I kind of realized there's tattoos on me that no longer represent me, my life, how I feel, how I think about myself, or that I want to see on a regular basis, which is that matching tattoo to my ex-husband. And it's right on my chest. And so that's where it started from there. And I'm going to remove this one. And that's kind of what led to if I remove this one, then what about that one? And what about that one? And so that kind of became the chain of thought. And I started to remove a few tattoos that I have spread out. I'm leaving some that I feel are more representative of who I am at the core and not things that I picked up along the way, I would say. And so, yeah, that's I'm getting my left sleeve removed, and then a few other various tattoos. And because it is a painful process, it does lead me to think like, oh man, do I want to do the other side? I don't know if I want to go through all that because I'm at the point of, well, I think I'm done with pain.
Yeah, undoing things can be harder to deal with than the original thing that started it. So I have to imagine that there's a part of you that as each of these are being removed, there is on one hand a sigh of relief that part is gone. But on the other hand, there's still some healing that has to be done mentally, right? Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing. I think that it's never done. As we continue to go through life and go through different experiences and have different situations happen in life, we learn to manage and cope differently. So I don't think it's ever really done.
Do you have to are you still in therapy? I should ask before I ask this next question, only because it ties together.
I do still see a therapist, not as frequently as I used to.
Okay. Because I was going to ask did you or do you have to report to the therapist? Yeah, I got rid of this tattoo. And do they ask you those questions of like, well, how did that make you feel? And what does that represent? And, all those types of things.
Not necessarily. I think that I did a lot of that at the very beginning before making the decision to remove the tattoos. Cause even getting to that point, that was a difficult decision. And then coming to the conclusion of, is it really what I want to do? And then, coming to the conclusion of, yes, that is what I want to do. It was almost, that healing all within itself and letting go of what was going to be removed. So I think like I have a session this afternoon after our talk. It's physically painful. And when that happens, I think that it also gets me like in a state of mind where I'm also processing the pain, and that leads to letting go of some of the emotional pain that has been tied to it as well.
All right.
So I think it is definitely tied to each other.
All right. So I've been trying to ask you questions without going into the deep, dirty, personal stuff, and I will respect that. But
I'm like, let's go.
we got to warm up to it a little bit, you know. Maybe we'll do a part 2 down the road. But I wanted to go back to the crux of what you started with the imposter syndrome, because obviously, yes, you sold the business, went through the divorce. I know that you've gone through a couple of other professional changes, and now you are head of community for, in a sense, a global organization. So I kind of want to ask, how do you see yourself now? Because you're doing things bigger and better now than you did when you were feeling that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to say that I'm proud of myself, because everything that I have been through and have worked on and have worked through has, so that I could get to a platform like this. So I think that within itself, I have to say I am very proud of myself. Not because of the title, not because of the job itself, but because of what it took to get here. And that it was not an easy journey.
Well, and since you're still getting rid of tattoos, I guess it will be a continuation of the journey. And I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with me to talk about that. I can't imagine that it's easy to just talk about things like that, but people ask you all the time, what happened? What happened to the tattoo?
Oh yeah. So I'm an open book. Or at least I try to be as much as possible, because I definitely feel like the more that we share our own experiences, the more that we can help others. And so that's why I am not afraid to talk about it or answer the questions. Sometimes it like if we're in a big group and somebody asks me, it's like, okay, let me give you the quick answer. Or, you know, if we have time, we'll sit here and go through the whole thing. But, a lot of the times it is kind of interesting to have people know me at one point in time and then to see all the changes throughout. So.
Well, I have been one of those people, and I've seen the changes, and I will, of course, be walking some of that journey with you, because we are tied together in some relationships business wise. So we'll see each other, and we'll have to check in from time to time and see how things go down the road.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, Nancy, thank you for coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Nancy Enriquez, and a good friend of mine in the tech channel, and we'll chat some more down the road. But for now, I want you to understand that the name of the show, The Unhealthy Podcast, as I said, it's not just about diet and exercise. It's about all things in life that are unhealthy, including our mindset, our self-esteem, self-care. And I hope that you got something today, and I hope that you'll come back and join us again on another episode of The Unhealthy Podcast. We'll see you soon. Holla.